Thank you so much, Sasha. It's my great pleasure to bring up to the podium my friend Craig Hatkoff, the co-founder of the Tribeca Film Festival, and I know so much more. Craig, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Ben. Okay, we have to go fast. We open up a little gamification, show of hands. How many people know what the original name of the Google search engine was? Next question, how many people know who owns the patents that underlie the Google primary search technology? Okay, we know who's in the audience. Okay, let's go. I had some notes. I have the enviable task. My presentation is called The City of Good. And the City of Good has been inspired by St. Augustine or St. Augustine. I watched a 3-minute video on the correct pronunciation, and I'm going to try and tie together a concept that New York versus the West Coast, Silicon Valley, we can call it Palo Alto, we can call it San Francisco. We should focus on a concept that many of you might have heard, but it is called STEAM rather than STEM. Because what we have in New York is we are the cultural capital of the world, and it will be very hard to undo what happens out on the West Coast. And so whether you use East Coast versus West Coast, Silicon Valley versus Silicon Alley, San Francisco versus New York City, STEM versus STEAM, I'm suggesting we should focus on the integration of culture and technology, culture writ large. And good example, I don't know how many of you have heard of this book, but it's worth at least a quick look, even if you go to the highlights on for those of you that use Kindle on Google. But Einstein and Picasso, roughly in the same time period, were both influenced by the same book. How many people have heard of Henri Poincaré? Not many. Poincaré's influence was both Cubism and the theory of relativity. I don't know what else to say about culture and technology, but this is where I think the integration of these two, and I'm just going to come back to St. Augustine or Augustine, whichever you prefer. In his book, The City of God, which I'm sure most of you have read or it's on your night table, he talks about the temporal city versus the spiritual city. And I'd like to propose very simply that the temporal city, think of that as tech. And tech is great, and I think the West Coast is going to own tech for a long time, for a whole bunch of reasons we can talk about. But he also talks about the spiritual city. And I think that the spiritual city is really where we're sitting tonight. The one known difference between Palo Alto and New York City is we have much worse weather, as we can evidence today. But I think this notion, if we took a look at tech and STEM as one designation, I think you could say that Palo Alto, the Valley, they're great. We may get great. I'm not suggesting we won't. We have a whole bunch of things going on. But I'm going to say we're really good at tech, or we can be really good at tech. But I don't know, and this is unfair to say that they're just fair at culture. And I'm going to suggest I've understated it by saying New York City is good at culture, because I really think we're great at culture. So what I'd like to suggest, sort of as my premise, if you want to roll forward, is that the West Coast will likely continue to control STEM, notwithstanding some of the comments here tonight. But when we can integrate culture and technology, I think that's going to be the sweet spot for all of us sitting in this room. And that is my premise, and I'd love to hear what other people think. And I think that was it.